Potentially, it can actually lower your calcium serum levels. So that can be an issue. If your vitamin D isn't up to scratch and you're not consuming with MK4 higher amounts of calcium, and if you've got pretty much a pre-existing, genetic predisposition to low serum calcium from being able to derive from food sources, so you need to consume more because you've got pastoral genes. I did a video recently. I'm one of those people, and so I have done high dose of MK4. I did not get any symptoms or any problems or anything like that when I was doing my high doses. But the reason for that was that I was consuming quite a bit of calcium as well. And it was primarily coming from cheese, because you can actually get higher amounts via cheese than milk. And also without getting a lot of the carbs as well, which is another important thing. So yeah, I would say. But you'll know if you're actually not, if you're basically affecting serum calcium levels. And it usually tends to be when it's really high, when you're doing like, the sort of 15 to 45 milligram sort of levels, there is a potential risk. Now, we don't see it in a lot of the experimental stuff up to 45, but they are short-term studies as well, and they are looking at animal models, and so it's really hard to know whether this could be an issue for other people, but it is a potential risk in that regard, especially if people have these types of genetics. Rats tend to pull in calcium much easier, so compared to even humans, let alone those who have got those genetics, pastoral genes. So we don't have the equivalent human research. We have some, but they never looked at serum calcium. They were done in short-term, long-term high dosing. Could it create an underlying serum calcium deficiency? Potentially. That's why I usually say to people, if you're doing megadosing, make sure you up your calcium intake just to be on the safe side, and make sure you're getting enough vitamin D and retinol in your diet, and exposure to sunlight or supplements for the right sort of enzymes to be transcripted and then activated by menaquinone 4. Plus, technically speaking, if you've got enough taurine in the system as well, which is what I had when I was doing I think that was regulating serum calcium and recovering serum calcium at the kidney levels and regulating the ions in the bloodstream. And I think that was sort of protective for me. So an animal-based diet that has a certain level of taurine may, under those circumstances, may not be a problem. As I said, the reason I'm using may or may not be is because we don't know enough. There's no research. It's sort of anecdotal and trial and error on what we're doing and how do you feel. Do you feel like you're getting a higher heart rate or your heart is pounding? Well, that could be a low serum calcium level. That means, something's causing it, especially if you're taking a high dose of MK4, that could be the culprit. But it also could be that you're not covering that. Now, I didn't have those issues, but at the same time, I was doing higher doses of taurine and many other things simultaneously. So just taking menaquinone 4 and being low on all the other stuff, could that potentially cause a problem? Maybe, but I've never experimented that way, so I don't know. So what are you feeling? What is your vitamin D retinol status? And many other things, taurine status. So maybe you should be looking at those things and playing around to make sure that you got the dosages right. If you're going to be doing high doses to remove calcium from soft tissue, because that's what menaquinone 4 does. So just keep that in mind. KL, and one other thing, I do it as a protocol. I never recommend, I usually recommend up to 200 micrograms for the average person, sort of low doses and all that, or getting it from, and those are the people that can't eat like brie and can't eat cheese, have got some sort of issue with dairy, and so they can't get sufficient menaquinone 4. So then I recommend, or don't like liver. So then I usually recommend, or eggs, I recommend to those people, well, get it from a supplement as a low dose. High doses we should only be doing because we're decalcifying, we're doing something specific. And you haven't spoken to me about any reason why you're doing it, or what are your health concerns and why you need to do that. So leave me a comment on exactly your reasons, and then I can give you a much better. Oh, thank God for that. I can pop it out. I like to use the chat box on the side because it actually allows me to keep track of what the hell's happening. Okay, so that seems to be working fine. Well, as I say, anything that's relatively fine is better than nothing in that regard. So yeah, so I mean, you've got to be very careful with single type interventions unless they are part of a protocol and it's synergistically combined with certain other things, and it's done at certain dosages for a certain period of time and for certain conditions. Just playing around with things that normally in the scheme of things we would never have these high doses from naturalistic sort of living and taking in, it just wouldn't happen. So keep that in mind. I don't like people doing certain things in excess when, just basically when you're not a lot of people do just supplements, I don't know, for just because they think it's a good idea, or I need to do it, or whatever. My sort of view is, really? Do you really need to do that in that regard? So, yeah. So I'd basically try and get it from food. But if you have a real reason, I haven't seen a comment yet from you. Yeah, please let me know what's your thinking behind doing it. Is it just because other people are doing it, or you thought you may be deficient? You're probably not. So anyway,